In 2013, this Tomahawk airstrike option was on the table for the Obama administration as well when you were at the State Department.
It was.
As was the opportunity to wait and try diplomatic routes. The Obama administration went with diplomatic routes. Can you give us an idea of what the reason for that was, what the calculation was that said Tomahawk missile strikes is the wrong thing to do?
Absolutely. I was very involved with this, working for Secretary Kerry at the time. I was up on the Hill with him during many of these meetings. The President Obama made a decision to take military action and redirected assets to the region to do so. He decided to go to Congress because we had heard from a lot of members of the House and the Senate that they wanted us to come to Congress and that they would approve of those strikes. This was right after, if you remember, the United Kingdom had gone through a similar process where they actually lost the vote. So we went to Congress, and unlike what they had told us before that process, they ended up saying no, they were not going to, in the end, approve those strikes. So we were left with a situation where the United States Congress had said no, and Secretary Kerry and our Russian counterparts were able to negotiate an agreement where we got 1,300 tons of chemical weapons out of Syria. Now, obviously, looking at what happened this week, that wasn't everything and that wasn't enough. But 1,300 tons of chemical weapons, many of which were in areas that are now controlled by ISIS and may have been taken over by ISIS, that we got out of a war zone in the middle of a conflict. Obviously, again, they still have some chemical weapons that they were able to use. It was not a perfect solution. But faced with the options we had at the time, that's where we ended up. There are also, I would say, a lot of us in the Obama administration, including Secretary Kerry, who at many times throughout the last 5 years argued for airstrikes and did it privately, did it publicly at times, but a lot of us who wish that maybe there were times we could have been more militarily engaged in Syria. Absolutely. What
was the calculation at the time, Marie, on whether taking these sorts of military strikes might cause an escalation, might cause a back and forth that you just described, might cause Bashar al-Assad to act again, requiring the United States to act again, and eventually enlarge the conflict?
It is a great question, Shep, and it is absolutely at the cornerstone of a lot of the military options that we were considering at the time. A couple of the folks you've talked to tonight have mentioned if Hezbollah, for example, decides to respond with a terrorist attack against one of the many U.S. military installations in the region. You know, we have a lot of U.S. military service members in Iraq. We have some in Syria. We have a big base in Doha. We have them in Bahrain. So we have a lot of facilities that if groups like Hezbollah decided to asymmetrically attack us, they could. And you know, I think what President Obama considered very seriously as he was looking at military options was always what the second and third order consequences could and would be. Sometimes those are unknowable, and sometimes you have to take action not always knowing what those will be. But in a region that is on fire, now with the addition of ISIS as a huge threat to the region and to the world, there are a lot of things that can happen if the U.S. gets more militarily involved. And talking to Americans, I haven't heard a lot of people say they want boots on the ground in Syria. They want American sons and daughters going to fight Syria's civil war. And so what is the right balance there? You know, tonight, again, great response. But what do we do if they do it again? What if they use barrel bombs? What are we going to do for Syrian refugees who we've said can't come to the U.S., but we're willing to drop bombs on your country? These are really complicated and serious issues that I hope the Trump administration is thinking through and that I hope to hear more from them in the coming days.
Marie, before I let you go, the Russians are on the ground with the Syrians and have been since 2015. The Russians from Moscow have said, we had no idea they had chemical weapons. We had no idea that they were responsible for this attack. Is there any way on earth that that's credible?
No. There's none. These are the same Russians who said they didn't interfere in our election, the same Russians who said they don't have people fighting in eastern Ukraine, the same Russians who have a huge ability to distort the truth and outright lie about matters of life and death. And I think that Nikki Haley was right this week at the UN when she stood up and called them out. And I want to hear that more from Secretary Tillerson and from President Trump, who up until this point has been unwilling to really criticize the Russians, and I want to hear more from him. The Russians are the ones who have said they have the ability to influence the Assad regime, and saying things like that, they tried to do it in 2013. It's just not credible, and the facts do not, the pictures do not lie, the facts do not lie, the intelligence does not lie. They cannot continue to deny this. It's going to be on them.
Marie Harf, State Department spokesperson under President Obama. Marie, it's nice to see you tonight. Thank you.